Sponsored by Rabbi Shlomi and Mirla Greenwald. This is a Sicha from Likutei Sichos, Chelek Yud Alef, Parshas Shemos, Sicha Alef. And the topic of the Sicha is that in this week's Parsha, we learn the pasuk of Vayemer Lekim al Moshe. Hashem said to Moshe, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, I will be what I will be. And we learn the teaching of the Medrash on it about the Geula from Mitzrayim. And there are 4 parts in the Sicha. The Rebbe will, number 1, explain the Medrash. Number 2, present how the final Geula will be different than the Geula from Mitzrayim. Number 3, ask how it can be that some Yidden weren't part of the Geula from Mitzrayim. And number 4, ask what's the explanation for the final Geula being different, where there every single Yid will be part of the Geula. On the pasuk of Vayemer Elokim al Moshe, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, that Hashem said to Moshe, I will be what I will be. So it says in the Medrash, Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, Ehyeh La'asher Ehyeh is only b'yechidim, as we'll learn in the next section of the Sicha, that when it says Ehyeh La'asher Ehyeh, it indicates that to some Ehyeh, Hashem will be their God, and to others, He won't, based on the person's choice. So Rabbi Yochanan said that only applies b'yechidim, by individuals. Aval b'merubim, but when we're talking about the Rabbim, the entirety of Klal Yisrael, al karcham shaloi b'tevasam, kishehein mishubaris shineim. Then it's by force, even when they don't want it as what's good for them, and it'll even be that it's breaking their teeth. Still, Melech ani aleim, I will rule over them, I will be their king. Shenemar, he brings a pasuk from Yecheskel, Chai ani nu'um Hashem alikim, im loy biyod chazaka gamer emloich aleichem. Even if it's by force, I will be your king. So Mefarshim explained the Medrash as follows, that when it says La'asher Ehyeh, which means that Hashem being Elikim is by choice, and therefore only La'asher Ehyeh. So when it says Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, we read it to say Ehyeh La'asher Ehyeh, I will be to the one that will make me be theirs. So that idea that it's by choice, the Medrash is telling us, is only said about individuals. However, by the Rabbim, so there Hashem won't allow them to remove the yoke of heaven, and Emloich Aleichem by force. And indeed, that's how it was by Mitzrayim, that even though there were a number of Rishayim among the Yidden, nevertheless, since they were part of the Klal, they were part of the Rabbim, so therefore they were also part of the Geula. And from this it's understood that even though the pasuk that's being brought over here of B'yad Chazaka Gomer Emlech Aleichem refers to the manner of the Geula from the days of Yecheskel and onwards, including the final Geula, because this is a pasuk from Yecheskel, so it refers to that point and on. Nevertheless, it also hints to the Geula from Mitzrayim that it too was B'yad Chazaka. So this pasuk is referring also to the Geula of Mitzrayim. At the same time, like the Medrash says, Hashem's use of the Yad Chazaka by Mitzrayim was only to force the Rabbim, but not in regards to the individuals. Like it says in the Medrash, and like it indeed says in the Medrash, that those Rishayim who didn't want to leave Mitzrayim, they died in the 3 days of darkness. Now, at first glance, we could say that since this pasuk of B'yad Chazaka Emlech Aleichem refers to the final Geula, and nevertheless the Medrash learns from it in regards to the Geula of Mitzrayim, that there too Rishayim were included in the Geula, so too we can learn from the Geula from Mitzrayim to the final Geula, and say that the B'yad Chazaka Emlech Aleichem only refers to the Rabbim, that only Klal Yisrael, but it doesn't refer to individuals. Those who don't want to leave the Galus, they will remain in Galus. They won't be part of the Geula, just like it was in Mitzrayim. And this means, if we're going to say this, that the promise of the Torah, that V'shavta ad Hashem Alekecha Gamer, that Yidden will do tshuva, and V'shav Hashem Alekecha Gamer, and Hashem will bring the Geula, which is saying that Seif Yisrael lasis tshuva b'seif Gelusan, that Yidden will eventually do tshuva by the end of the Galus, umiyad hein Negalin, and then they will immediately be redeemed. That's what it's saying in the pasuk. V'shafta, you will do tshuva. The Yidden will do tshuva. V'shav, and then Hashem will bring the gula. We're going to have to say that that is only said about the Rabbim in Klal Yisrael, but not individuals. And those who don't want to leave the galus won't leave the galus. However, in truth, we cannot say this. And like it says clearly in Rashi, in the pasuk of this pasuk of V'shav Hashem Alekecha, that Hashem will bring the gula. Rashi says that it refers to each and every individual. Rashi says, Oichaz b'yadav mamish ish ish. He'll hold their hands, literally every single person. To look to la'echad echad b'nei Yisrael. Every single yid will be gathered. And this is a result of what it says in the beginning of the pasuk. V'shafta ad Hashem Alekecha. That Seif Yisrael lasis tshuva b'seif gulusin, which means that this tshuva refers to each individual. Every single individual yid will do tshuva. And therefore every single individual yid will be part of the gula. And the Alter Rebbe also writes this. He says that each yid bevadei seifei lasis tshuva, every yid, certainly their end will be to do tshuva, k'la yidach menu nidach, because nobody will be fully pushed off. And according to this, all Rishayim, even those who won't want to leave the galus, are included in this. That Hashem will also awaken them to tshuva and take them out of galus. And like it says clearly in the pasuk, that v'hoya b'yemahu, it'll be on that day, yitaka b'shefer gadol, it'll be blown with a great shefer, u'bawa evdim be'eretz ashur v'anidachim. That also the Oivdim and Indachim, those who don't want to leave the Galus, they will also come and they will also be part of the Geula. And like we spoke a number of times about the answer to the Ben Rasha, that said by the Haggadah, in the Haggadah, by the Seder, he said, Ilu hayasham, loy hayanigol. And the question is, what are we trying to tell him? Are we trying to push him off by saying if you were there, you wouldn't have left Mitzrayim, you wouldn't have been part of the Geula? That the explanation is that we're telling him if you were there, you wouldn't have left the Galus, you wouldn't have been part of the Geula. But in the final Geula, in this Galus, you will be part of the Geula. And that's connected to what was done, what was changed by Matan Torah, where Hashem said, Anochi Hashem Alekecha, which accomplished that Anochi Hashem became Alekecha, Kechacha, and Chayuscha of each and every individual Yid. And so by the Geula Asida, by the final Geula, each and every Yid, even those who won't want to leave, will be part of the Geula. And this difference between the final Geula and the Geula of Mitzrayim is a result of what was accomplished by Matan Torah, that Anochi Hashem Alekecha of each and every individual Yid, that for each Yid, Anochi Hashem is Alekecha, Kechacha, and Chayuscha. However, we have to understand over here two things. There are two questions. The first question is, the reason Hashem took the Yidden out of Mitzrayim is like it says in the pasuk in our Parsha, that B'ni B'cheri Yisrael, that the Yidden are Hashem's son, firstborn son, V'omer lecha shalach es b'ni. I'm saying to you, send my son, free my son from Mitzrayim. Meaning that it's because of this kashrus of a father to his sons. That's where the Geula came from. That's why Hashem took the Yidden out of Mitzrayim. And this refers to each Yid, even the lowliest ones, since this kashrus of a father and his son is tivis, it's natural, and atzmis is connected to the essence of the person, which doesn't change. It's not impacted by the child changing. And like Chazal indeed say, Benkach u benkach atim kruyim banim, no matter what you're called, banim, my sons, and lachlifim b'um acheres eni yachol. And Hashem says, I can't exchange the Yidden for another nation. If so, if the Geula came about because of this kashrus that Hashem has to Yidden, which is this kashrus of a father to his son, so why didn't all Yidden leave by Yetzias Mitzrayim? All Yidden should have been included in that, because we see that this connection of a father to his son is something which is natural, and it's atzmi, and it's not something which could change. So why were some Yidden included in the Geula and some Yidden not? All Yidden should have been included in the Geula from Mitzrayim. And the second question is, in Mitzrayim, there were many types of Rishayim, and even Yidden that were Oivdei Avodah Zarah. And to the extent that when the Yidden left Mitzrayim, it says that Pesal Micha Imayim, some Yidden brought along with them Avodah Zarah. And nevertheless, even though there were many types of Rishayim, and even Oivdei Avodah Zarah Mitzrayim, nevertheless, these Yidden merited Yetzias Mitzrayim. And so the question is, why didn't those who didn't want to leave also merit Yetzias Mitzrayim? So the first question is, why didn't all Yidden merit Yetzias Mitzrayim without exception? Since it comes from, the Yetzias Mitzrayim came from the Kesher Atzmi that Hashem has to every Yid, which can never be changed. And the second question is, focusing specifically on the group that didn't merit, why was it that group specifically, that those who didn't want to leave, they didn't merit Yetzias Mitzrayim? So this will be understood by first explaining the inyan of Kaparas Yom Kippurim. So we're going to go into the side discussion, we're going to explain a certain idea, and based on what we explain over here, we're going to answer our two questions. When it comes to the inyan of Kaparas Yom Kippurim, the opinion of Rabbi is that al kol aver shabbat Torah, on all averos in the Torah, bein also tshuva, whether a person did tshuva for doing these averos, and bein loy also tshuva, whether a person did not do tshuva for doing these averos, Yom Kippur mechaper, Yom Kippur atones for all the averos. However, Rabbi agrees that by karas yema, if a person did an avera on Yom Kippur, that's something connected to the isurim of Yom Kippur itself, karas of this day of Yom Kippur, so then Yom Kippur isn't mechaper. Yom Kippur doesn't atone for that avera. And here too we can ask, since al kol avera shabbatera Yom Kippur mechaper, since Yom Kippur atones for all averas in the Torah, meaning when we say all averas, it means even for severe averas. So why isn't it mechaper on karas yema? Why is this specific type avera, this specific type of avera, an avera of karas connected to the day of Yom Kippur itself? Why isn't Yom Kippur mechaper on that as well? It's mechaper al kol averas, on all averas without exception, even severe ones. So why this avera specifically, this type of avera specifically, karas yema, Yom Kippur doesn't atone for? And the Rogatchover explains and answers this question as follows. He says, since the chet, the avera of karas yema, is in the inyan of Yom Kippur itself, so Yom Kippur itself is what caused the chet. We're talking about a person who was over karas yema. He did something that the day says if you do it, you get karas. So it comes out that Yom Kippur itself is what caused the chet. If it wasn't Yom Kippur, it wouldn't be a chet to eat. It's only because it's Yom Kippur that it's a chet to eat. If so, the cause of the chet can also be what's mechaper. We can't say that Yom Kippur that caused the chet is also mechaper on the chet, because ein kateger nasa saneger. There's a concept that the thing that is the prosecutor that brings the avera can also be the defense, and so Yom Kippur, which is what brought the avera, can also be the thing to defend and protect the person from the avera. And in the signon of Teres Chassidus, on Yom Kippur, the etzem eskashrus of a yid telekus is revealed. That's what happens in Yom Kippur. The etzem eskashrus that a yid has telekus that's not dependent and based on the avodah of a yid, that eskashrus, that connection is revealed. And in that place of that etzem eskashrus, there's no weight to any chet. The chet doesn't have any weight. However, by karas yema, that means the person is opposed to the day of Yom Kippur itself, because the person is not keeping the day of Yom Kippur. They're not doing what they're supposed to do on this day. So since the person is opposing the revelation of this iskashrus, so therefore the iskashrus can't help with being mechaper for the chet, because the person is opposing it and not giving place for this iskashrus to be revealed and to have its impact. So in Teres Chassidus, the way it comes out is not that ein kateger nasa saneger, but rather the thing that brings about the kapara is unable to be revealed. The iskashrus can't be revealed because the person is opposing that iskashrus. And if the person is opposing that is kashrus and it can't be revealed, so then automatically the avera remains, because the thing that could take away that avera is not here. And similarly here, when it comes to Yetzias Mitzrayim, this erus, the awakening and the gilui, the revelation from above to take the Yidden out of Mitzrayim, it resulted from the gilui of the iskashrus of Hashem to the Yidden as a father to a son. And since this iskashrus is a iskashrus atzmus that can't have any changes, so therefore all Yidden left Mitzrayim, even the Rishayim, because like we said, ben kach u ben kach bonayim, no matter what a Yid does, even if a Yid is a Rasha, still ben kach u ben kach bonayim, they still are sons of Hashem, and they have the iskashrus atzmus to Hashem. However, those Rishayim who didn't want to leave Mitzrayim and wanted to remain avodim la'avodim, they wanted to be slaves of slaves, they wanted to be slaves of the Mitzrayim and not slaves of Hashem, which is the opposite of being avodai, the slaves and servants of Hashem. And certainly it's the opposite of being b'ni b'chayri. So since they were opposing the gilui of the iskashrus itself, so this gilui cannot help them with the geula from Mitzrayim, which is like the idea of ein kateger nasa saneger. The thing that's going to bring the Yidden out of Mitzrayim is the iskashrus atzmus. a Yid who doesn't want that Iskashus Atzmus, so then they can't get the benefit of that Iskashus Atzmus. They're opposing it, so it can't serve as something which helps them. And so that's why not all Yidden left Mitzrayim, and the ones who didn't leave were specifically those who didn't want to leave, which means they were opposing the very thing that would allow them to leave, the Iskashus Atzmus that we have, that a Yid has with Hashem. However, it's still not understood. There's a difficulty over here now that we answered our first two questions. And that is, just like the desire not to leave Golus opposed the Iskashrus of Hashem to Bnei B'chei Yisrael by the Geula before Matan Torah, so too it opposes the Iskashrus that was added by Matan Torah of Anochi Hashem Alekecha, which brings to the final Geula. We said earlier in the Sicha that only in Golus Mitzrayim was it Eya Lasher Eya, that it was only to those who wanted to leave, but not for those who didn't want to leave. But in the Gula Sida, in the final Gula, it'll be for everyone, and that's because of the Chiddush of Matan Torah, that Anochi Hashem Alekecha, that Anochi Hashem is the Koyach and Chayas of every Yid individually. However, the question is that just like by Golus Mitzrayim, those who didn't want to leave, they were opposing the Iskashrus of Hashem to Bnei B'chei Yisrael, and so therefore that Iskashrus couldn't bring about the Geula for them. So too by the Gula Asida, by the final Geula, for those Yidden who won't want to leave, we should say that it opposes the Iskashrus that was added by Matan Torah. And if so, according to the rule of Ein Kateger Nasa Saneger, how will there be the final Geula for those who won't want to leave the Golus? Now we're going to move on to answering the question, and with the answering this question, we're going to conclude the Sicha. And the answer is quite a long answer. There's really a lead up into the answer. We're going to present a certain idea, and based on that, answer the question. But we framed it here that the whole thing is an answer. And the ideas that are going to be presented here are quite deep, and we're not going to focus so much on understanding these ideas as much as the flow and structure of the Sicha and how it answers the question. So in the Chiddush and the greatness of Matan Torah, we find two things. Number one is that at Matan Torah, Hashem chose the Yidden. As this is seen also in Halacha, that when a person says in Birchas Krishma, Uvanu V'charta, they should remember Matan Torah. As it's brought down in Halacha that all Sheish Sechiris are mentioned, they should be remembered at different parts of either Birchas Krishma or within Krishma itself. So that's one thing that happened at Matan Torah. Hashem chose the Yidden. There was the Bechira of Hashem in the Yidden. And number two is that Yidden became a Shubid and they became Avadim of Hashem. We became servants of Hashem. Like the Maimar Razal, that Oizin Sheshama al Har Sinai Kli B'nei Yisrael Avadim. That Har Sinai is connected to the Yidden being Avadim, servants of Hashem. And as it's written, B'yitziacha, and this is in our Parsha, B'yitziacha es ha'am Mitzrayim, so tavdun es alikim ala har hazeh. So we see that Matan Torah is connected to the inyan of Avdos. And as we'll see later in the answer, these two things are connected. The idea of the Bechira of Hashem and Yidden, and the Yidden becoming Avadim are connected. Now the Chiddush and the greatness and the advantage of the Skashrus of Hashem to Yidden through the Bechira of Yidden over Yidden being Banim, what's the greatness of the Bechira over Banim? Banim was before, and Bechira was only by Matan Torah, only came about by Matan Torah. So it'll be understood from Bechira by a person. We see clearly that when a person chooses something, the desire for what they chose is greater than their desire to something that they naturally desire. So there's things that a person naturally desires, and then there are things that a person chose. And we see that the desire a person has and the pull that they have to the thing that they chose is greater than to the things that they naturally desire. And the reason for this is the definition of the teva of a person, the nature of a person, is the gdarm of their metzias, the type of person that a person is. There's different types of personalities, different types of people, and the teva means what type of person this person is. And therefore, when a person desires something because of their teva, because of their nature, the intensity of their desire is according to the intensity of their teva. and so it's a limited thing. However, true bchira, which true bchira is when there are no reasons for the bchira. Because if there's a reason for the bchira, then it's not real bchira. The person didn't choose the thing. The person was compelled to choose it. True bchira is that the person has no reason for the bchira, but rather it's the person chose it because they wanted to choose it. So that comes from a person's atzmos, from the essence of a person. If there's nothing pulling the person to choose it, so why are they choosing it? It's because they attach themselves from the atzmos of their being to it. So that comes from the atzmos of a person that transcends the gdarim of one's teva. And like we see indeed in bchira itself, that a person is able to choose something which is against the teva, against what the teva desires. So we see that bchira is greater and deeper and more powerful than what a person naturally wants. When the person wants something because of their bchira, it's much greater, and therefore a person could choose and will then want something which is against what their teva desires. And similarly, it's above by Hashem. The desire and love of Hashem to Yidden, because we are banim lamakim, that we are sons to Hashem, children of Hashem, is similar to the desire and love of a father to a son. Meaning that it's a skashus from a tzir and prina pratis. It's from the teva, it's a natural thing. So, like we said earlier, something which is ingrained in the nature of a person is a specific thing, whatever it may be, it's a prina pratis, and it's a place of a tzir. It has a defined form that it takes on, and it has limitations. However, by Matan Torah, when Hashem chose Yidden, which, like we said, bchira comes from the atzmos of the one choosing, so the iskashrus is from the very atzmos, the very essence of Hashem that transcends any description. It's not a bchina pratis, doesn't have a tzir. It's from the very essence of Hashem. And this deeper connection affected the iskashrus of Yidden to Hashem, that it shouldn't just be based on their teva, but rather because of their atzmos. So it's from the atzmos of Hashem, and it became ingrained in part of the atzmos of Yidden. And this is found in the Yidden becoming avodim by Matan Torah. That's connected to avodim. So now we're making the connection, like we said at the beginning, towards the beginning of the answer, that these two ideas that were neschadish, they came about Matan Torah, the bchira of Hashem and Yidden, and Yidden becoming avodim are connected to one another. As is explained in Hemshech Samach Vav, the difference between a ben and an eved, between a son, a child, and a servant. That the way a ben serves Hashem is like it's his teva, just like a son is drawn to his father. However, it's not avodah from one's own koyach and bchira. It's just the nature. There's no avodah that was done with the person's koyachas, and it wasn't bchira. It's the nature that a son is drawn to their father, and so it's not called avodah at all. However, the avodah of an eved is not based on their teva, and to the contrary, it's the opposite of their teva. What is an eved? Rather, it's that the person on their own and with their own koyach chose to connect and serve Hashem, to be a servant to Hashem, to the extent that one becomes entirely bottle. They put aside their entire existence. It's not what they want to do, but they put aside their entire existence, and their whole existence becomes the existence of the Adin. And so that's connected to the very essence of the person, just like the idea of bchira. Now we're able to answer our original question. According to this, we'll understand the difference between the Geula from Mitzrayim, where over there, those who didn't want to leave did not leave Mitzrayim, they weren't in the Geula, and the final Geula, where there, everyone will leave the Galus. The skashus of Yidden as Banim comes from our Teva, and therefore a Yid can oppose this connection by using their Bechira, which comes from the Atmos of a person, which is higher than the Teva of the person. So since this kashas of banim comes from the place of a person's teva, a person has the ability to go deeper into their atzmus and use their bchira to oppose their teva of being a ben, of being a son. And so those who did that by Golus Mitzrayim, they didn't leave Mitzrayim. They weren't part of the Gula. However, the skashus of Yidden, because Hashem chose the Yidden and Matan Torah, that comes from Hashem's atzmas. And therefore it caused our connection to Hashem to also be from our atzmas. And it's understood that it is unable to oppose this skashus that comes from their atzmas, because it's the very essence of who we are. Since it's the essence of a Yid's existence in the deepest of places, so that's something that can never be opposed. And therefore it's understood that eventually this bchira will be revealed, and every Yid will choose Hashem, and Seif Yisrael lasis tshuva b'Seif Guluson u'miyad hein negolen. Ultimately, eventually, every Yid will do tshuva, will return to Hashem, and immediately be part of the Gula. And so, when it comes to this deeper thing, it's impossible for Yid to oppose it because it's the very essence of who they are. And when they are opposing it, it's because they're not in touch with their true essence. Because that's what Matan Torah accomplished, that it became the very essence of a Yid, that they are connected to Hashem. And so therefore, it's impossible to oppose it. And so ultimately, every Yid will do tshuva, umiyad hein negolim.